post-lunch, we are going to talk about here sustainable food safety through capacity building. And for this, we have the speaker over here, Dr. Samuel Godefroy from University of Laval, Canada. Dr. Samuel Godefroy is the former Director General of Health, Canada's Food Directorate, Canada's food standard setting body, and a former Vice Chair of the FAO Codex Alimentarius Commission. Samuel is currently full professor of food risk analysis and of regulatory policies in the Department of Food Science, Faculty of Agriculture and Food Sciences, University Laval, Quebec, QC, Canada, and is leading the development of a food risk analysis and regulatory excellence platform hosted by the Institute of Nutrition and Functional Foods of University Laval. Professor Godefroy currently serves as a senior food science and regulatory expert on a number of advisory bodies and committees domestically and internationally, including on the International Advisory Committee of the China Center for Food Safety Risk Assessment. Professor Godefroy also served as a strategic and operational advisor to international food safety capacity building initiatives focused on regulatory enhancement implemented by the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, that is UNITO, and the Food and Agriculture Organization of the United Nations, FAO. Professor Godefroy is the founder and the current president of the International Society of Food Regulatory Science, a non-for-profit organization incorporated in Canada with the aim to promote food regulatory science disciplines at the international level. Dr. Godefroy assumed senior food regulatory positions at the executive level with Health Canada for over 15 years. And here Dr. Samuel Godefroy will talk about sustainable food safety through capacity building. Can we please have the AV?
I would like to thank the organizers of the annual meeting of the AOAC India section for their invitation. It's a privilege for me to contribute to the program of this year's event, speaking about the importance of integrated food safety capacity building initiatives and calling for regional investments. During this talk, I will be positioning the importance of investing in food regulatory systems as a prerequisite to enhance the food safety capacities of the food production sector, and I will be advocating for regional investments in certain areas of capacity building. When we speak about food safety, we know that it is a shared responsibility involving both the industry, consumers, but also regulators. Regulators are playing an important role because they receive a delegation of authority on the part of consumers to act on their behalf, and regulators make the decisions in order to manage the relationship between consumers and producers, food producers, and also to level the playing field amongst the actors of the food production sector. It is important that regulators operate in a manner that provides a predictable environment and supports the development of the food and agri-food sector. And in this regard, the Codex Alimentarius Commission provided some guidance as to the best practices of the Food Competent Authority through the guidance and the principles it offered on the design and operations of food control systems. In summarizing those requirements, in order for a competent authority to operate with an effective set of measures, it needs to anchor its programs, its decisions on a robust legislative and regulatory framework. The predictability comes from a consistent decision-making framework based on the risk analysis paradigm, the risk analysis principles, risk assessment, risk management, risk communication. And there is a need to have a collaboration between the various partners supported by a robust governance. Of course, a competent authority cannot operate unless it is based on functioning institutions, but also given that food safety is based on scientific disciplines, we need to have a strong scientific capacity, including a capacity to analyze food. So essentially, the food analytical capacity is an important component of a good functioning food competent authority. Now, to paraphrase Codex, the definition of a food control program are the collective actions and activities that are set in order to manage specific food safety hazards, to assure the quality, the safety of food, and to support fair practices in the food trade. And an effective food safety competent authority is one that anchors its actions and its operations in this robust legislative framework, that bases its decisions on the application of the risk analysis principles, that ensures effective regulatory operations both for standard setting and compliance and enforcement, and that has an enabling set of operations, scientific capacity for risk assessment, laboratory operations, as well as the ability to communicate about risks. A number of these functions, in order to be developed, require important levels of investment. Investing in competencies takes time and takes money. In investing in the generation of data, the availability of data, which is essentially a key element to support risk assessment, which is again the element that is needed to underpin decisions, risk management decisions. All this requires time and money. Now, any investment that is made in a food production sector in a manner to enhance its food safety capacity, either through the adoption of enhanced food safety standards to be followed by the industry, or through specific investments across the supply chain from primary production up to the retail level, any type of these investments need to be supported in parallel by regulatory enhancements. The investment in the food regulatory capacity needs to come hand in hand with the investment in driving food safety practices of the food and agri-food production sector. And speaking about these investments in enhancing food regulatory capacities, given the costs, given the time that it takes in order to build those food regulatory functions, being able to make such capacity building investments in a regional framework would allow to maximize the return on investment, but also would be able to create economies of scale and would enable us to reach the sought after objectives in a shorter period of time. These are some of the areas where a regional investment would be most beneficial. Certainly, in those areas where there is a strong element of scientific capacity and competency building, where there is also a strong level of investment in the availability of data, risk assessments, the development of standards, the coordination of policies and related to compliance and enforcement, but also the creation of common mechanisms for incident management and information exchange. Those are elements that can be invested, that can be developed at a regional level and would offer opportunities when developed as such. And in this regard, I would like to share with you an experience that was implemented in the Arab region through an initiative funded by the Swedish International Development Agency, implemented by the United Nations Industrial Development Organization in collaboration with the League of Arab States and two of its subsidiary organizations, and that aimed in creating a favorable food regulatory environment to support the development of food and agri-food trade capacity within the region. I will let you review this video, and then I would like to come back and comment on a few aspects related to regional food safety capacity investments. In January 2016, the Arab Food Safety Initiative for Trade Facilitation SAFE was launched with the overall mission to coordinate and possibly harmonize food safety regulatory measures in the Arab region, aiming for the enhancement of health and safety of Arab consumers and to enhance intra-regional trade in food and agri-food commodities, which in turn will reap benefits on Arab economies. 18 Arab countries were part of the journey, with the funding offered by the Swedish International Development Agency, SIDA. This initiative was implemented by the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, in partnership with the League of Arab States and its subsidiary organizations, the Arab Industrial Development and Mining Organization, and the Arab Organization for Agricultural Development, with the important collaboration of representatives of the food production sector, mainly the Arab Union of Food Industries and the Arab Federation for Food Industries. SAFE has achieved both institutional and technical breakthroughs, starting with the creation of a regional food safety governance structure under the auspices of the Pan-Arab Free Trade Agreement, or PAFTA, called the Arab Task Force for Food Safety, or ATF. Throughout the life of the project, the ATF oversaw 5 initiatives led by 5 technical working groups, each under the leadership of an Arab country. Jordan, Lebanon, the Arab Republic of Egypt, the Kingdom of Morocco, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. These initiatives resulted in practical tools contributing to building blocks of convergent food regulatory measures, such as 1. The issuance of Arab guidelines for a rapid alert system for food and feed, which aims to structure and fast-track information exchange related to food and feed safety incidents in the Arab region. 2nd, the coordination of Arab Codex initiatives with the development and issuance of guidance to enhance effective participation in Codex proceedings. 3. Competency enhancement and talent development through a network of Arab food risk assessment experts. 4. A guideline on the development and adoption of a common food import-export certificate to be used in Arab countries. And 5. The adaptation of the International Food Control Assessment Tool and the identification of priority food safety investments into Arab countries. At the institutional level, the ATF was anchored in the League of Arab States governance as decided by the Economic and Social Council of the League, adopting the ATF as one of its organs along with an SPS-TBT committee. This initiative was implemented while ensuring gender balance in all events and activities that were organized. SAFE also powered targeted country-driven initiatives in several countries with specific agreements to enhance food safety performance in Egypt and Palestine. In Egypt, SAFE contributed to the initial institutional and program development of the newly created National Food Safety Authority, NEFSA, with an emphasis on capacity and competency development. In Palestine, the agreement with the Ministry of Health contributed to enhancing food inspection control systems. These efforts supported making food safety as a top agenda item for Arab senior decision and policy makers. SAFE continued to look to sustain and consolidate the investments made to date through the commitment of all the initiative's partners to continue towards building a common food safety regulatory environment in the Arab region. There is a significant value added in these regional approaches. The ability to share resources, particularly in generation of data, for example, the design and implementation of monitoring and surveillance programs. The ability to rely upon consumption information, food consumption information, so critical to risk assessments. The ability also to direct some targeted research, for example, to look at the effectiveness of food safety mitigation measures when they are applied in a context that is specific to the region or to the set of countries where these are being investigated. The other benefit is that through these investments, we are driving at the same time towards convergent or harmonized food regulatory measures, which in and by themselves would limit and reduce the amount of technical barriers to trade and differences in sanitary and phytosanitary requirements between the different countries that are involved in these investments. At the same time, we are able to maximize the return on investment in competency development, and we are able also to target certain investments in a manner that is complementary between the various countries of a given region. This generally results in a stronger stance for the region, particularly in international standard setting forums such as the Codex Alimentarius Commission, through a better coordination of the positions of these countries involved in this region to present, for example, in the context of the discussion of an international standard. Now, of course, these investments require also multiple facets of areas of focus. First of all, we need to invest in competencies that is needed for risk assessment. We need to invest in data, and data requires generally good food laboratory operations. And this is what we have been trying to promote in a modest fashion through the platform of food risk analysis and regulatory excellence of Université Laval, and through the integration of the International Food Safety Training Laboratory. This is a capacity that was integrated in the platform's operation in 2019 with the objective to offer training in major food analytical methodologies and protocol using chromatography-based techniques, and through the collaboration of the Waters Corporation. We consider that this level of investment will allow us to contribute in the availability of data through, of course, a stronger capacity of food laboratory operations in the various regions where such capacity building programs are considered. We are hopeful that these investments will allow the availability of stronger competencies to address multi-residue pesticide analysis, multi-residue veterinary drug analysis, but also that will allow to strengthen certain food regulatory functions such as compliance and enforcement, where food laboratory analysis is so critical to provide the evidence needed for decisions and protocol. And we're hoping again that through these measures that we will enable better opportunities for effective food safety regulatory programs, which are so key to ensure the protection of consumers, but also to provide that enabling environment for the investment in the food and agri-food business. Of course, none of this will be possible unless there is a collaboration amongst all the stakeholders, the academic centers that we represent, with multiple academic centers that we're trying to develop collaborations with around the world, with the food industry, with the service providers, as well as with the food regulators and the representatives of the consumers community. Once again, thank you for the organizers for giving me the opportunity to speak at this forum,